So, when was the last time you cried bitter tears about being in Gullus, about us being in exile, about God's presence not being revealed? Not something we all cry about too often, isn't it? Or is it? So, this week's Torah portion, Parshas Chukas, among the many laws and stories, talks about a great woman, Miriam, the sister of Moshe and Aaron, who passed away. And when she passed, the well of water from which the Jewish people were drinking for the last 39 years in the desert dried up. The Talmud and the tradition tells us that there were 3 great miracles that happened in the merit of Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. The manna came from heaven in the merit of Moshe. When he passed away, it stopped. The clouds of glory that protected the Jewish people, and all that, it was in the merit of Aaron, his brother. When he passed away, that stopped. And then the well of water that traveled along with the Jewish people, their hydration in the desert, was in the merit of Miriam, their sister. And when she passed away in this week's Torah portion, it stopped and there was a whole complaint. And there's a whole story over there. The Rebbe talks about this and says that the Torah is so precise in its messages, and the word Torah means lesson and guide. So everything that the Torah tells us is a guide for us in our lives. So when the Torah chooses one story or 2 stories in the life of an individual, then those are the main stories, main messages that are eternal for us to learn from and live by, etc. So in a talk, the Rebbe was talking to a bunch of women, who was teachers and counselors and mothers and grandmothers. The Rebbe spoke about this, I think it was in the 80s, and he said that in this story, let's look a little bit deeper into the story. Who was Miriam, and what does the Torah tell us about her? And the Torah tells us that Miriam, at age 5, she was already, she was helping her mother as a midwife, and she was actually her role. She had another name called Pua, and Pua means Pua et Avlad. She would pacify the babies. The babies who would cry, her job was to make them feel better, to pacify them, to make them happy, to bring them joy, like only she could. Later on, the Torah also talks about Miriam, where she helped the Jewish people cross the river, when the sea split. She had tambourines and she was joyous. She brought joy to the people, song and dance. So the Rebbe combined those 2 things. She was a pacifier of children who cry. The Rebbe says, who's today a child that cries? In those days, it was the Egyptian people. It was us. Us, the Jewish people in Egypt, in Mitzrayim, under this wicked Pharaoh, enslaved, and we weren't able to learn Torah and observe the mitzvos as we want to. And so the people were obviously crying. And of course, the children were crying as they were giving birth, etc. But the Rebbe says that this represents a paradigm of sadness. And so we were all crying in Miriam's job, and by extension, our job, all our jobs, because we hear the story and we get to know about it and to learn about it from the Torah. And especially, the Rebbe said, the woman's job, and the woman has a unique ability to do what? To stop the crying of a child. And the Rebbe said that this paradigm of a child's cry is happening today for every Jew, every single Jew who is aware of it, and many who are not aware. Most of us are not even aware that we're crying inside. The Rebbe said, but surely everyone is crying because we're still in Gullus. We're still in exile. And we're not in the rebuilt Jerusalem with the Beis HaMikdash, with all the the mitzvahs that we can do then. Says the Rebbe, the job of a Miriam and of us and by the woman is to pacify a Jew in exile, is to tell our friends and ourselves that God put us here for a reason, to really to bring the sparks of the galus of exile with us, to elevate ourselves and the world around us, and not necessarily to have it easy and holy as one might want, but necessarily to have it difficult and challenges, and thus we're elevating this whole world. The evil or negativity. Oh, we're back. It just said that it was disconnected, but thank God we're back. So long story short, the Rebbe says that our job is for the Miriam of the world, to pacify the Jews and to stop them from crying and complaining about the exile, about the galus, and tell them that they have a great role, a big part in transforming the world and bringing Mashiach. That said, there's an incredible story I just read about my great-grandmother. She's a famous woman. She was known as the Mumma Sarah. Mumma Sarah, the Aunt Sarah. For us, she's Bubby Sarah. She's the mother of my grandfather, Rabbi Zalman Kazin. Lived in Cleveland, Ohio. Whose yahrzeit was yesterday, Ches Tammuz. So the Mumma Sarah was famous because she forged passports to enable Russian Jews to leave the harsh, bitter conditions of communist Russia, to save their lives and to go to freedom. And she did that until the very last passport she gave was actually to the Rebbe's mother, Rebbetzin Chana. Unbelievable. But the story of today is where while she was caught and she was put into prison to be executed, her son, Reb Moshe Katzenellenbogen, still alive and well, Baruch Hashem, today. My great uncle, my grandfather's brother, he was also imprisoned, and they figured out that they were one floor separated, but in the same room. So she was on the top floor, and he was one floor below her, and it was the window that separated them. So somehow they figured out by a method of sending a little thread down to the next window below them. Okay, we're back. My phone said it was reconnecting again. So try to make this fast before this happens again. So she sent a note down. Basically, they communicated with each other through a series of notes via a thread that went from the window above to the window below. I'm not sure how he sent the thread back up. Oh, well, they kept the thread there and kept the answer there. Okay. So what was their communication about? What did they talk about? What did they ask? One of the notes came to us. Not the physical note, but the story of the note. Where Moshe, my grandfather's brother, he says, I remember one time the note came down. Imagine a mother of a son who's imprisoned for 10 years in exile. He was actually 10 years in prison. And she's designated to be shot and killed, which she was. What are they talking about? She asked this question, says her son. She says, Moshe, my son, Shabbos afternoon, we daven mincha. I know the mincha amida. It's short. I know it by heart. It's short and simple. Shabbos morning, there's a different amida. There's a different Shemona Esrei. I don't know it by heart. Is it okay for me on Shabbos morning to daven the Shemona Esrei, the amida of Shabbos? Again, third time disconnected here. But is it okay, asked the mother to the son, on Shabbos morning, can I daven, can I pray the Amida, the Shemona Esrei of Shabbos Mincha, which I know by heart? That was the question. Ha! That was the question of a mother who's going to be shot and killed, to her son who's sentenced for 10 years in prison for being Jewish, for being a rabbi, for helping Jews be Jewish. It's connected to this week's Torah portion, as one of our relatives wrote in an article in Israel. Said this week's parsha is Chukas. Chukas is, how could this be that this is on her mind? What specific prayer, and if it's okay? And he said, Moshe, he said, I remembered the law, that it was okay, and I told her that she can. But the point over here is really greater. Why was this on her mind? Connected to this, the name of this parsha, Chuka. Chuka is a law. It also means engraved. Chuka hakakti. The Alter Rebbe talks about different ways we connect with communication with paper. You could write with ink on a parchment or a paper, and they're two separate things. And then you can engrave something into a stone, and they become one. When your connection with Judaism, with God, is like ink on parchment, it can be separate and you can be thinking about other things. But when your connection is an engraved one, when you are one with the Torah and with God, like the Rebbe always quoted the Zohar, there are three rings that are interlocked always: God, the Torah, and the Jewish people. And even when you're in the Russian prison, that's on your mind. Good Shabbos. God bless you. Let's connect.